Hi guys, so my good friend Jeff, the Brexiteer, is talking about, in this video, Boris Johnson's meeting with the European Union on Monday to discuss Brexit, probably, unless he's going to talk about something else. But Jeff has some demands for Boris Johnson, so let's hear what he has to say.
The UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson is due to have a conference call with the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen tomorrow to obviously discuss the state of play with the Brexit talks. Von der Leyen will be joined by the EU Council President Charles Michel and the EU Parliament President David Sassoli. Boris will have the UK Chief Brexit Negotiator David Frost and the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster Michael Gove.
Okay, you know it's going to go very well if Michael Gove is there. Sorry, let's get back to the video.
So the scene is set, but what will they talk about? Well, I've no idea other than the expectations bandied about by the press, but I have a few outline ideas on what I want him to say. And that is firstly, that the final recourse for all UK legal matters within our country and places like Gibraltar will be the UK Supreme Court or the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council.
Okay, so let's just stop here for a moment. Let's remember back when Boris Johnson was proroguing Parliament. Do you remember that last year? When he was doing that, he was being challenged by the Supreme Court in England. Now, his response to that was, we don't want this independent court deciding what Parliament wants to do. And his response, of course, was also to attempt to undermine its independence and make it answerable to Parliament, or actually worse than that, answerable to the government. So the government would be able to decide how courts interpreted the law. Government would be deciding, not the independent judiciary. So what Jeff is asking for is that at the end of the day, the courts will decide, but it will be the politicians who will decide what the courts can decide, which is not independent.
That the UK is becoming fully independent of the EU at 11 p.m. on the 31st of December 2020.
What does that mean, independent from the EU? You've left. You're no longer a member of the European Union. What does fully independent? Fully independent means absolutely nothing.
That the UK will not allow any external control, and that even joint control in matters such as fishing is off the table.
This is a request that is a complete misunderstanding of the roles of both parties here. Jeff and the Brexiteers seem to think that the EU and the UK are equals, and that the UK can make whatever demands they want, and the EU must respect them. It doesn't work like that, Jeff. One is a large entity and the other is a smaller entity. If Boris Johnson and the Tories want to have trade deals and cooperation on other issues after Brexit, then they need to sit down and they need to negotiate in a proper way. You can't just ask, well, we want a situation where you get nothing and we get everything.
And on fishing, he needs to tell the EU presidents that the UK will take a very dim view of foreign vessels raiding its waters and take immediate and robust action to deal with it.
I really don't understand this issue of fishing. Why is it so important to Brexiteers? It makes up such a small part of the UK economy. But it seems to be, this is one of the first topics he talks about, fishing. Why? Why is it so important if it makes up such a small part of the economy? It doesn't make any sense to me, unless it's just a political aspect. It's some political thing that we can use to rile up the Brexiteers. Throw them some meat. Tell them we need to protect the fish.
Also, that we will licence some EU boats to fish, but that in our efforts to rectify years of overfishing under the CFP, the EU cannot expect the same level of access as they have previously enjoyed.
But you seem to think that the Tories actually care about fishermen or the fishing industry, or they care about citizens, or they care about actually getting a deal that's good for Britain. Do you not understand that they don't give a crap about any of that? They'll get a deal that's suitable to their donors, not to the fishing communities, not to citizens, not to you, Jeff. They don't give a crap about you. I'm sorry to say this, but they don't. They'll get a deal, if they want to have a deal, that's suitable for their donors.
I want him to make absolutely clear that this EU-controlled so-called level playing field is a total non-starter. He needs to inform her that after all this time and struggle to achieve Brexit, the UK government has absolutely no intention of once again handing over the keys to our front door via some dodgy trade deal.
What do you mean, handing over the keys? Do you not understand how trade would work? You're no longer a member. The EU has no control over you. It didn't have control over you before. It was a cooperation. You were a member. It's not that they decided and you had to follow the rules. You were a member. You had influence, a huge amount of influence. You decided not to have that influence anymore, and you decided to walk away. And now you're demanding that they respect something, and you're demanding that they keep stun and you decide the rules.
He should also say that our armed forces will remain fully under Her Majesty the Queen and will not become part of some wider EU military venture.
Iraq, George W. Bush. You know, you're talking about, yeah, we don't want to become we don't want to become part of a European army. That was never going to be an issue. Jeff, you know, I'm a bit disappointed that you didn't know that the UK had a veto. They decided not to you know, if you're walking away, then you're going to lose your veto. You actually had a veto on this. You could have stopped, I don't think it was ever going to happen, but a EU army. It was possible for you to stop it with your veto. So this whole European army was a complete red herring.
Now, the Brussels side will already be well aware that the UK intends to follow a 6-month plan for gradually imposing any necessary border checks with the EU in order to prevent economic shock from the COVID pandemic and from Brexit itself.
What? What am I actually hearing here? Jeff is saying that Brexit is going to cause economic shock. Just think about that for a moment. This channel, Jeff's channel, is all about talking about how great Brexit is going to be. Brexit is fantastic. We need Brexit. Brexit is going to make Britain better. And now you're talking about an economic shock? What? I thought everything was going to be great. I thought everything was going to be fantastic. The day we leave, we're going to be free. Everything is going to be fantastic. There are going to be companies and countries lining up to do trade deals with us. That hasn't happened, but it's going to happen probably on the 1st of January. But once we get over the shock, you really sort of shot yourself in the foot by saying there's going to be a shock from Brexit. I thought everything was going to be perfect. How can it be perfect if there's going to be a shock? How can it be even good if there's going to be a shock?
But Boris needs to make the case for the EU to reciprocate in the strongest way he can. And also remind von der Leyen that most of the delivery trucks that travel between the EU and the UK are EU owned. So if lorries get stuck on this side of the channel due to EU imposed border checks, then it will be EU companies that mostly suffer.
What, you're going to hold them hostage? So if the trucks are coming back, but that means that so if their trucks are traveling to the EU, but for example, I don't understand this. You're talking about trucks delivering goods from the EU to the UK, and then if they're returning from the UK, well, I assume they're empty, or if they're delivering goods into the EU and these goods don't arrive, then who suffers? Well, partly the companies in the EU, but also the UK will suffer. Just give me a moment to give you an example. Imagine I have a company making car parts, for example, in the UK. The goods arrive. The government have no tariffs or any checks or anything, which is strange for me and strange surely for Brexiteers, because they talked about taking back control and controlling our borders. But you want to have open borders. Okay, let's say, for example, you have your open borders, goods come in, then I want to sell those goods back out to the European Union, and they get stuck in Dover, or they get stuck in Calais. Now that's a problem for me, because my customer is saying, where are the goods? Where are the goods? They're stuck at the border. Well, I need these goods today. Well, they're not going to buy from me the next time. They're going to source them in Europe, because then there won't be any delays. So this is not something good for the UK economy. You can say, well, the goods coming in are not checked. And once again, this completely flies in the face of we need to control our borders. And it's going to be, again, damaging to the UK businesses that are exporting to the EU. Because if goods are stopped at the border and they're blocked, it doesn't matter whether it's on the English side or on the French side, it's still a problem for UK businesses. I don't know how you don't see that.
And he should also tell her to stop it with the rubber dinghies.
Stop it. It's like, well, she's deciding where people go. You know, this is just going to get worse. Because you don't want to have a relationship with France. You don't want to have a cooperation on people traveling between France and England and Britain regarding immigration. So it's going to get worse, Jeff. Because at least if you have an agreement, you can say, please, France, do this and we will do that. But if you don't have an agreement, the French will just let them go. And say, go to Britain. They're your problem now. And once they're in international waters, then you, under the Geneva Convention, have to pick up these people. It's nothing to do with the EU anymore. This is, you can put pressure on her if you cooperate with her. But you can't put pressure on her if you're not cooperating. I don't know, you seem to believe you can have your cake and eat it.
And with this sort of thing in mind, he needs to make it clear that both sides need the certainty of knowing whether it'll be a deal or a no deal by September, to make sure that businesses know what they are dealing with from the 1st of January onwards and can prepare.
Unfortunately for British companies, they're not receiving any information from the government. European companies are being told to prepare for a no deal. European institutions have been preparing for a no deal for years now. When a no deal was first appeared out of the ether, European institutions and organizations started to prepare for it. The ones who are not prepared for a no deal are the ones in Britain.
And of course, he also needs to make it absolutely clear that the UK is fully prepared for the no-deal scenario, which would be better than to continue lounging about in this drab implementation period waiting room.
I have to give him, compliments for his adjectives to describe the waiting. This drab waiting room. Okay, but how is at the moment you have the benefits of being a member without actually being a member of the European Union. Wait till you leave completely. Wait till you are no longer a member without the benefits of being a member. At the moment, there's trade passing between the UK and the EU frictionlessly, but that's going to end. It's much better the situation you are now. It's much better to be a member because then you can actually influence policy, but you've decided not to be. So you're in this limbo at the moment, and then you're going to leave it, and it's going to be extremely damaging. But you have decided that. You have talked about how great it's going to be, even though it's going to be a shock.
Anyway, if you want to hear more from me, please.
That's all he has to say on this topic. So what do I think is going to happen? Well, I think Boris Johnson is and I've said this before, Boris Johnson is going to go. We're not going to go because it's online, but he's going to attempt to get some sort of promise that the European Union is going to do X, Y, or Z, and then he's going to broadcast it to Parliament. Yes, I have twisted their arm, or I have convinced them to do X or Y, which will be a complete lie, because Boris Johnson is almost incapable of telling the truth. So of course he's going to tell the public, yeah, the European Union have agreed to do this and this, and we're going to get our deal. It's just a matter of time. And the way I see it is probably Boris Johnson is trying to run down the clock in a way to convince the European Union to give him some sort of basic deal, something that he can sell the public, something that he can convince his party is sufficiently like a deal so that he can survive. Because that's what it's about. It's about him surviving as Prime Minister. It's not about improving the UK economy. It's not about saving jobs. It's not about becoming independent, as Jeff says. It's about saving Boris Johnson. This is Boris Johnson's mess, and he doesn't want to be consumed by it. Let me know in the comments, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks. Why not become a Patreon and enjoy access to our Discord server where we share news, chat, and have some fun? If you become a patron, you can also make video suggestions on topics that are important to you. Check it out via the link in the description.